Okay. So, so this is like we're into starting the fourth month of the lockdown and shelter in place and all the restrictions. And thank goodness most of us are safe and healthy, and extended family as well. And our prayers are with everyone who might have been um, afflicted with the virus, and we just wish refuah shlema, a complete healing to all those who are ill. This week's portion is Shelach Lecha, and it is in the Eitz Chaim on page 840. In any other Chumash, just find in the table of contents Shlach Lecha in the book of Numbers, or look for the book of Numbers, chapter 13. That's where we start. So now, the last week we were in Baha'alotacha. The people were just getting ready to move away from Mount Sinai. It contained, among other things, the portion, the verses, the sentences that would be recited once the people started moving. Vayehi bin Soa Ha'aron, when the ark was traveling, etc., etc. And then Uvenucho Yomar, when the ark rested. This is the sentence that would be recited as well. And we had the detour with Miriam and Aaron, Moses' sister and brother, and they're gossiping about Moses. And Bill, Mazel Tov on the anniversary of your bar mitzvah. And as he wrote to me privately, but I decided to make that public, Bill. So I'm not saying what number anniversary it is. That will remain private. But yes, Mazel Tov on your bar mitzvah anniversary. And okay, so the bulk of this portion today is about the sending of scouts into the land of Israel to scout out the land and report back. They're supposed to be there for 40 days and to report back about the condition of the land so that the people would be prepared to enter. So in other words, they're really on the cusp of entering the land of Israel, and had everything gone according to plan and the people been faithful, we wouldn't have needed the rest of the portion, and perhaps it would have set the stage for a better result of what the Jewish people could have aspired to. In other words, had the people had faith, had all 12 scouts instead of just 2, said, it doesn't matter. Yeah, the cities are fortified and the people are strong, but it doesn't matter. We all agree we have faith in God, and we know that we're going to be able to take the land. And if all 12 scouts had said that, and if the community of Israel had said, yes, we believe, then they would have started marching, and they would have gotten there in about a week. And then the rest of the book of Numbers we wouldn't have needed, and the book of Deuteronomy, etc. And it could have set the stage for the book of Judges and Samuel and books of Kings about how the people of Israel are more faithful people than what it turned out to be. So that big what if only all 12 spies had agreed, and it wasn't just Joshua and Caleb. So let's look at the below the. So that's the bulk of the portion, and then I think we'll have time to get to something that happens near the end of the portion, where there's God teaches some more commandments to fulfill. So in other words, we have the book of Exodus, with the portion Mishpatim and other portions that contain some laws to observe. The entire book of Leviticus is about laws to observe. And here in this portion, we have some laws that are taught as well. So let's go below the line on page 840. where it says, the events of this parsha are crucial in the Torah narrative, explaining why it took 40 years for the people to reach the promised land. Like I said, it would have been only 2 years or a year and a half for the people to get there, right? Because the result of the punishment for not having faith in God was that that generation needed to die off in the desert so that the next generation would be the one to enter the land of Israel. And so that's why they stayed in the desert for 38 more years. We already have seen certain undesirable character traits emerge among the Israelites so far in the book of Numbers. Grumbling about food and living conditions, a nostalgia for the less complicated life of being a slave in Egypt. So we had that last week in last week's portion. These will culminate in a massive failure of nerve when God summons Israel to attack and conquer the promised land. The people do not believe in their own ability to do that, and by implication, do not believe in God's ability to ensure their victory. As a result, God decrees 40 years of wandering to end only when the generation that left Egypt has died off. So, you think about this. I'm thinking about World War II and how Winston Churchill was able to rally the citizens of the United Kingdom that despite being under a nightly barrage from the Nazi Air Force, he was able to instill hope and faith in the cause, and that it would be okay. We will suffer losses, but everything will be okay. And in the end, we will rise up and defeat the evil Nazi empire. So you think about how you need a charismatic leader in a time of war, right? And you need, no matter what the war is, the charisma that, so the purpose of going to war has to be one in which everyone buys into, right? Which is the failure of the Vietnam War, where what caused that war to fail miserably at the cost of over 50,000 lives was that ended up that the majority of Americans were not behind the goal of the war. Whereas what enabled World War II for the Allies to be victorious was, among other things, the will of the majority of the world to defeat the evil Nazi empire. So you have to have people to buy into the cause. And then you also need the charismatic leader, because even if the cause is just for going to war, you don't always know that you're going to win. So, you just look objectively, like Israel, the establishment of the state of Israel in 1948, and then immediately Israel needing to fight for a year, the War of Independence, that you would argue that Israel on paper should have lost that war, and should have lost that war quickly, because 600,000 inhabitants, Jewish inhabitants of Israel at the time, versus the combined armies of 7 Arab nations that they were going up against, you would have thought that that was a David and Goliath kind of battle that should not be waged. So there are certain things then that in 1948, you had people who were fighting for their lives in order to defeat the Arab enemy, and you had the charisma of David Ben-Gurion and other leaders of Israel at the time to be able to and then you had support of some allies for Israel at the time as well, with Czechoslovakia being a major source of weaponry, and Germany as well, so that Israel was able to win. In 1973, America at the last minute was able to send more more resources so that Israel could win the Yom Kippur War. So my point here is all of that, by extension, is that the people did not buy into it. You had the most charismatic of leaders in Moses. You had Joshua, who was going to be the next leader, and Caleb. And despite that, the people did not have faith. And if the people weren't buying into it, it was not going to succeed. So that's why that generation needed to die off, that lack of faith and that lack of will. And then the next paragraph on the page goes, one cannot be expected to leave the state of slavery, toiling in bricks and straw, and go to fight with giants, right? So in the end, in looking back on it, it makes total sense that the generation of slaves who left Egypt needed to die in the desert, right? And look at how are they fit to be able to enter the land of Israel. And the counter argument would be, well, they're learning about it. If God wants them to enter the land, then so be it. God would have made them to enter. But this is Maimonides suggesting this. It was therefore part of the divine wisdom to make them wander through the wilderness until they had become schooled in courage, until a new generation grew up who had never known humiliation and bondage. And the only part of this is that God made them fail. Right? So if you're saying that it was God's wisdom to have this generation die out, then it's God's wisdom that God's intervention and made it such that the mission of the scouts was going to fail, which leads into the next comment here, because the Torah says, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, send men to scout the land of Canaan. Okay, so it's God's command to Moses to send men to scout the land of Canaan, which I, that is God, am giving to the Israelite people. Send one man from each of their ancestral tribes, each one a chieftain among them. Okay, so that's God's command to Moses, that Moses should pick a nobleman from each tribe to be sent as a scout to the land of Israel. So we get to the comment, which is also on the bottom of 840. There, the word send. Hebrew, Shelach Lecha, literally send for yourself. Right? It should have just been in the Hebrew, Shelach Anashim, send men. Why does it say Shelach Lecha? Send for yourself. So we could also be reminded of chapter 12 in Genesis, when God says to Abraham, Lech Lecha. God could have just said, Lech, me'artzecha umimoladetecha. Go from your land, from your homeland, from your father's home, to the land that I am showing you. What is the point of the Lecha there, the extra emphasis? Lech is written in a command form. You go. That's what Lech means. Shelach, you send. So why do you need the Lecha, which means for you? Shelach Lecha, send. You send for you. Why the extra emphasis? Is it a biblical, poetic usage of Hebrew? Or is there something extra there that we need to interpret behind that extra word lecha? So that's what this commentary is suggesting. Send for yourself, that is, for your own purpose, not mine. So in other words, which does God seems to be saying, the comment is saying, I have told you already that the land is good and that I will give it to you. If you need human confirmation of that, go ahead and send scouts. So the comment, which is Numbers Rabbah, which is the rabbinic midrash on the book of Numbers, is suggesting that this command to send the scouts is God's compromise, or at least God's understanding that maybe the people need to do this for themselves, that already God is understanding the people are lacking in faith and trust, and that as a result of that lack of faith and trust, God's going to be proactive and say, okay, I know that you might not be ready to enter the land right now. Okay, I'll let you send scouts, and then you'll see that you'll be able to enter the land. But then that plan obviously backfires in the way that they report back to God. Okay, so the commentary then reflects this idea. Why is God telling Moses to send these scouts when God knows what they're going to say? So is God setting the people up for failure in this way? And so, in other words, it's a whole bigger discussion about God's role in intervening in our lives today. And for the rabbis, God does intervene. And if God intervenes, then God intervenes for the good and for the bad, and it has to be consistent in that way. And then we have to then rightly question, what's the purpose of sending the scouts anyway? If God knows what's going to happen, what's the point of sending the scouts? And that's perhaps the people have to see for themselves that they're failing in this test, as opposed to God failing in the test. So these are some of the theological or deeper questions that the rabbis ask about this whole mission of the scouts themselves. So the mission was, if we look on 841, beginning with verse 17, we have the names of all the chieftains from all the tribes who are going to be chosen as scouts. When Moses, verse 17, chapter 13, verse 17, when Moses sent them to scout the land of Canaan, he said to them, so this is their goal, their mission, what they have to accomplish on their mission. Go up there into the Negev and on into the hill country, right? So this is the path you're supposed to take from the south into the north, and see what kind of country it is. What are the people who dwell in it, strong or weak, few or many? Okay, so right, you got to report back on, are there a lot of people there, a few people, and of the people who are there, are they strong or are they weak? Is the country in which they dwell good or bad? Right, so is it a good land or not? Are the towns they live in open or fortified? Is the soil rich or poor? Is it wooded or not? And take pains to bring back some of the fruit of the land. Now it happened to be the season of the first ripe grapes. So that parenthetical note there, bring back some of the fruit. Well, the fruit they're going to bring back is grapes. So now the next comment I wanted to share is based on the next two sentences, next couple of sentences. They went up and scouted the land from the wilderness of Tsin to Rehov at Levo Hamat. They went up into the Negev and came to Hebron, where lived Achimam, Sheshai, and Talmai the Anakites. Now Hebron was founded 7 years before Tzoan of Egypt. Okay, so the Torah is providing us a historical note here about how old the city of Hebron is, and we're supposed to remember the city of Hebron in that the matriarchs and patriarchs are buried there, right? And that's it was a key feature in the lives of and events that took place in the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Okay, so that it is significant to mention Hebron, but what we're missing from the English translation is something peculiar about the Hebrew. So verse 22 says, they went up into the Negev and came to Hebron. So that implies that they went into the Negev and they came to Hebron. But the Hebrew says, Vaya'alu vanegev, they went into the Negev, Vayavo ad Hebron, and he came to Hebron. So the Hebrew should have been consistent like the English makes it. So they came to the Negev should be, it says Vaya'alu Vanegev, and it should say Vayavo'u ad Chevron. They came to Chevron. But the Torah says Vayavo, and he came to Chevron. So that then raises the question for anybody who comments about the verse, why, so if God wrote the Torah, why did God not pay attention in 8th grade English and do grammar correctly? God should have known to say Vaya'alu Vanegev, Vayavo'u ad Chevron. Why did God make the mistake in the number, in the form of the verb? Okay. Now, there is an asterisk in the Hebrew next to the word vayavo, which looks, if you see that in the Eitz Chaim, and if you had it, if you have the Hertz Chumash, you might have a footnote there too, or any other Hebrew edition would have a footnote there that refers to this note. It says in the Hebrew, Sevirin umatin. Some people think, and they make a mistake, that it should be in the plural, Lashon Rabim. So, in other words, some people think it should be Vayavo'u, based on what I just said. And so there could have been some manuscripts that changed the word Vayavo to Vayavo'u. I'm spending a lot of time on this grammar because of the comment we're going to see below the line. So the asterisk points out to this comment that some people corrected the Hebrew, and the footnote is suggesting that they are making the mistake in doing that. So when we open the Torah scroll to this portion, it would say in the original Hebrew, without the vowels and without the cantillation marks, it says Vaya'alu Vanegev Vayavo. Okay, and there's no way to read Vayavo as Vayavo'u. Okay, you have to have an avav after the aleph to make it plural. Without a vav there, the only way to read it is in the singular. Okay, so the question is now, how do we understand, because like I said, in the English, it doesn't look like it's a mistake. How do we understand this supposed mistake in the Hebrew text? So below the line gives the traditional commentary to this. So they went up and came. Hebrew, Vaya'alu, Vayavo. Okay? The first verb is plural, but the second is singular, just like I explained. This prompted the Talmud to suggest that while the other scouts were gathering economic and military data, Caleb, who's representing the tribe of Judah, was motivated to visit the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron, which is from the Talmud in the tractate Sota. Now, Hebron turns out to be in the tribal portion that will be Judah. Okay, now, so it's interesting. The land of Israel hasn't been apportioned yet. We're going to get to that at the end of the book of Numbers, where Moses kind of pulls out pieces of paper from a hat, that kind of system, randomly assigning each tribe to a portion of the land of Israel. So in the end of Numbers, we'll know that the part of Israel, the southern part of Israel, which includes the city of Hebron, will be in the tribal territory for Judah, but it's not there yet. So this comment suggests that Caleb, representing Judah, always knew that Hebron was part of his ancestral tribal holding. So there's that part to it. The other part to it is that Caleb is the only one who cares enough about the ancestry of the entire people of Israel. He's the only one who cares about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel, Leah, to want to visit their tomb, right? So he feels the spiritual need to make that connection. So in other words, there are some people, you can picture some people back in the 40s and 50s who made Aliyah to Israel. That's also, by the way, this Vaya'alu, they went up. This is the source for the understanding that when we go to Israel, we're making Aliyah. Because the word here, Vaya'alu, they went up. So anybody who goes to Israel, and there have been people over the centuries who recorded this, as soon as they got to the land of Israel, that physically landed in Israel, they would bend down and kiss the land. Okay, so that going to Israel becomes a spiritual quest. And no matter how many times you go to Israel, how many times I've been to Israel, I feel it. There's just something special when you finally see the coastline from the window of the airplane, and you say, and you're flying over as the plane makes its approach, and you see billboards, like there are tops of buildings that have on the roof words, advertisements in Hebrew, and it just never fails to move me to see the Hebrew as the plane is about to land in Israel. So that feeling is what apparently the Talmud is suggesting Caleb has upon entering the land of Israel. I'll catch up with you guys later, he says to the other 11. I'm going off here to Hebron. And this is just something I need to do. The Talmud says Caleb does. Now, the commentary goes on. He alone was able to see the land, not only as it was at the moment, but as what it had meant and would mean in terms of God's promise to the patriarchs. So whether it was Caleb or somebody else, the rabbis are suggesting, because it's in the singular, that he came. So in other words, the English should say they went up to the Negev and he came to Hebron. That's what the English translation should be, literal translation of the text. So who's the he? Which one of the 12? So for the rabbis in the Talmud, it's got to be Caleb, because the Jews who are left in the time of the Talmud are descended from the tribe of Judah. So therefore, and Hebron is in Judah, so for the rabbis, it made sense. It had to be Caleb who's representing the tribe of Judah. And, the story, who's the son of Jacob, who's speaking to Joseph in Egypt, it is Judah himself. So the primacy of Judah in the Torah, the tribe of Judah in the Torah, and the primacy of Judah throughout Israelite history and the rest of the Bible prompts the rabbis to say that it must be Caleb. So not even Joshua, they're suggesting, is the one who did this. It's Caleb who did it. So they're making this connection that one of them, at least one of them, had the idea that he should go to Hebron to be with the patriarchs and kind of get their blessing. So to say to the patriarchs and matriarchs, we made it. We made it back from Egypt. We're here, and we're going to now fulfill your promise. We're going to enter the land of Israel and settle. So the commentary continues. They went up. They ascended not only geographically, but to a higher spiritual level. So in other words, the Aliyah, the Ya'alu, because it's in the hill country and they were in the desert, it's literal going up. There is a rise in elevation from where they were to get into Israel, but it's a spiritual elevation as well. No matter where one comes from, going to Israel is referred to as Aliyah, going up. In other words, if you lived in the Himalayas, one of the highest places on earth, and you moved to Israel, which is lower than the Himalayas, it would still be making Aliyah. Okay, so it's all about a spiritual ascension to Israel, because as a Jew, there is no more spiritual place for us to be than in Israel. Similarly, one is called to the Torah for an Aliyah, an ascent to a higher level, whether or not there are steps to the Bima or not. And so there are rooms in which Torah can be read, in which even in the time of the Talmud, it's that sometimes the Bima was lower than where everybody else was, because there's a phrase, Yordim lifnei hateva. You go down, you descend to be in front of the ark. So not even if there isn't a bima on which you are ascending to go to read Torah, even if it's flat or even if it's lower down, it's still called having an aliyah, because you're spiritually going up to the Torah. Okay, so I also, well, in the time remaining, I do want to talk about one other thing, and that is one of the laws that we find at the end. So so after they come back and report to the people, 10 of the spies are saying, "Oh, we were like we seemed like grasshoppers in the eyes of the inhabitants, these giants who are living in the land of Israel. They brought back this fruit, which were gigantic, and they said it's going to be impossible. The cities are too well fortified. It's going to be impossible." And the people start complaining, "Why, Moses, are you bringing us there only to be killed? We can't do this." And then God says, "Okay, everybody has to die, and this is their punishment." And the people learn what their punishment is going to be, and some decide to start going and waging battle, and they're defeated handily. And that's the end of that whole section dealing with the spies. And then, now, I just do want to point out one thing which isn't in the commentary, and that is on page 847.